The funny thing is that since the end of the podcast, people still kind of, I think, feel like they have a connection with the people that were on it because of things like Twitter and stuff. But like the rest of us tend to talk about our daily lives and stuff sometimes on Twitter and the mundane shit that maybe people do or don't want to know about.
Yeah.
But I regularly go to Sean's Elliot's because when I'm sitting down with my friends, sometimes hanging out, we use Sean's as the best way to find out the worst shit on the internet.
Right, that's why I just don't click. I follow Sean, but I never click anything.
Yeah, I don't click for like a month, and then I go through it all.
This
for like one depressing
at
evening.
Home all the time, not at work.
This goes back to like when he would send us emails at work, and you were like, there came a point when you were like, I know not to click on any links in Sean's email.
Right. Well, the thing was, he would always just like grief. It would be on instant message too. He would just be like, he would just like fake you out. Like, hey Jeff, you should see this thing on NeoGAF or whatever, and then I click it, and it's like goat porn or.
But one of the stories that Sean has been like using his journalistic skills to track down over the years is the story of Christopher Chan.
Christopher Weston Chandler.
Christopher Weston.
They're blaming on me.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know this guy.
Yeah, when you mentioned this guy,
I'm surprised. Like this guy would have been like absolutely like prime time for GFW Radio, and I'm amazed we didn't talk about him.
maybe we did. But God,
I still think to this day that he's like one of the most amazing stories to come out of social media ever. And every time like you have news segments on how the internet can go wrong, we'll have a bullied teen or something, basically losing it. They're always just like skirting around the periphery of the story of Chris Chan, and it's like, imagine. I'm trying to think of how I can summarize this very briefly, like before we dive into like the particulars of his case. It's like, imagine you have a guy whose entire reality is being constructed by other people on the internet. So the people who he interacts with, his girlfriends, I put that in scare quotes, all of these are essentially people fucking with him, and he's completely oblivious to it. So, yeah, I mean, the thing to know about him is he's self-described as high-functioning autistic. And there's no reason at all to doubt that. I mean, he exhibits every sign, of it that you'd imagine, and namely just an absolute inability to mind read. Mind read in the psychological sense, where it's just like anticipating what other people's intentions are. Are they trying to manipulate you? What are their intentions? In the way that you're interacting with them. Just completely oblivious to it, and because of that blind spot in his mind, you can come at him with more or less anything, and he's going to believe it, and he's not going to doubt it. So all you would need to do, for example, to seduce him is make a fake account with like a photograph of an attractive woman and say you're this woman, and you're absolutely ready to date him and to have sex with him. He's a 30-year-old virgin. He just turned 30 years old, and he's completely interested in sex, and say, hey, I am ready to suck your dick and fuck you, Chris. But what you need to do is take your sex doll into the McDonald's parking lot and fuck the shit out of it and make out with it on video, and then post that video to the internet. And so from these sorts of things happening over and over again, and for about like 5 years now, there's just this incredible body of work, I guess you can call it, of him doing obscene things. And it's the thing that makes it unique to me is that there's an entire community devoted to maintaining his fiction. So they have what's called the Quickie, and it's the Christian Weston Chandler Wikipedia, basically.
We're on it right now.
Documents this entire history of scams pulled on this guy and every one of the foibles. And so,
wait, how does he not know this?
Well, he does, and
he's high functioning autistic, and for whatever reason, he can never make sense of it.
But
this is probably something that in like 20 years or 30 years, people will show this as like a textbook case of a kind of like incredibly despicable crime. Like something that's like completely.
This whole time.
Yeah,
this isn't funny.
No, but it's
supposed to be funny.
I know, like I shouldn't. Like I was thinking recently, there was this flap where a commentator for fighting game community was essentially sexually harassing when women was playing games with them.
I wouldn't say essentially, I'd say he was.
Yeah, and it was completely despicable. And I thought about it, and I was like, man, why do I watch this Christian Weston Chandler shit when it's every bit as bad and perhaps even worse? Because he doesn't even realize what's happening. And every time he realizes what's happening, it's like you can just completely reset it the next minute by making a new account and starting it all over.
I mean, the thing is he does really. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, like, it's so hard. There's just so much there. A book really does need to be written about it because it's so phenomenal. And there's so many insane twists and turns where they've created these like nemesis for him, or people who are like, trolling him and stuff, but they're fabricated as well. Like, there's this guy called Surf Shack Tito, and he's from some, like, they based it on a character from some like SpongeBob cartoon or something, and he thinks he's real. And then they eventually had a crossover with, there's this notion of like a YouTube superstar, or like we call them tube-tards, where they're basically on YouTube who are just making a public wreck of their lives. And there's this guy called Fat Man who publicly like overeats for Kickstarter money, essentially. Like, he'll host a live feed and you donate money to buy him like as much food as he'll possibly eat. So he's this entirely unrelated tube-tard, and they made a fake account for him, for Fat Man, and said that they basically approached Chris Chan and say, hey, these guys have been tormenting you and tricking you all this time. We got their identities and we're going to give you them. And one of them was Fat Man. Of course, Fat Man didn't even know that Chris Chan existed. Chris Chan didn't know who Fat Man was. And so Chris Chan's making videos calling out Fat Man and making fun of him. And Fat Man's responding, like, screaming at Chris Chan for whatever. And it's like the entire time this is being like written like a novel by these people who are, like I said, are tracking every fucking event.
I'm going to find it so fucking gratifying when we learn that this whole thing is a hoax perpetrated on Sean Elliott.
By him.
Like, that would be, it's actually Andy Kaufman. He has returned to exclusively create this environment for you.
The best part is that even when Christian Weston
else into Andy Kaufman without their being aware of it is how I would describe it. Hey, I would be happy if it's a joke perpetrated on me. That's better.
Be relieved at humanity
or guilt at laughing. Dude.
It's so crazy, just the shit that is on camera now. Like, I can't even fathom it. It's like the endless fucking sorrow or something. I just can't believe how much fucking terrible shit you can watch from people's lives on the internet.
Well, and the worst part about it is, even though Christian Weston Chandler does catch on and eventually takes down these videos, by then someone has always recorded them off YouTube and preserved them for the sake of history and reposting them constantly.
Mirrors and shit.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So where's this guy's parents? Is there like anybody looking after this guy?
I think that's part of the problem.
That's part of the problem.
Ultimately,
is like there was the longest time where his dad and mom would sometimes appear in videos, and they would actually fuck with them as well. So, for example, they would convince Chris to get into a cyber sex session and to get him like beating off like furiously.
Wait, his parents would do this?
No,
ferociously jacking his
the
pud.
internet.
Oh, the internet would, not his parents.
Just bricking that pud, and then they call his parents' phone number and say, "Hey, you've got to get in the room. Chris is on the internet saying he's going to kill himself. Bust in the door and stop him." And then so he's on webcam jacking off for what he thinks is a woman, and they're capturing footage of it so that they can repost it on the video. And then his dad comes in, "Chris, they're saying you're going to kill yourself on the internet. What are you doing?" And he's just like, "Leave me alone, Dad. I'm jacking off." And then they post that video on the internet. And then, very, very tragically, I'm going to seem completely insincere after I just did that, is his dad recently passed away.
Yeah.
And they just completely, made a complete mess of that.
This is the saddest story I've ever heard.
I mean, at one point
it's just horrible.
It is sad, dude. I think it's among like the biggest modern day tragedies that's just waiting to cover.
Yeah. At one day they had
civilization deserves everything it's got coming.
This is all some story you're making up.
No.
I'm looking at the wiki right now.
At one point they had Chris Chan.
Oh, that makes me believe.
At one point they had Chris Chan give
I
a
believe
video.
everything I read in the wiki.
At one point they had Chris Chan give a video tour of his home, which they also captured and kept on YouTube. And it turned out his family is hoarders. They're totally hoarders. And his parents were like, "We're going to lose our home because you put this video up on the internet. Take it down." But it didn't matter because the goons had it.
Yeah, speaking of bad videos.
You got to edit it. And then what they did with that is they took and made a remix. You know that Keisha song? Keisha with the dollar song? They made a remix entirely out of Chris Chan and his dad arguing to like whatever her like hit song was. Get that stuff off of there.
And he also, one of his constant obsessions is this character that he's made that his wiki is named after, called Sonichu, which is it's a recolored yellow Sonic the Hedgehog.
Well, it's a combination of Sonic and Pikachu.
Right. And various people at various times have trolled him into believing that they were actually Shigeru Miyamoto contacting him to make his character into a video game.
Yes.
Oh.